Hello, guys. I'm hoping that you can see and hear me. I'm going to go into the chat and make sure that you guys can all see me. I don't know if it's going yet. Okay, it's now popped up on my computer, so hopefully you can see me. Please let me know in the chat if you cannot, and I'll try to troubleshoot it, but it should all be working okay. Let's see, I'm gonna pull up my question sheet here. It says there's a couple of you watching, so if you wanna give me a little shout in the chat, that'd be awesome. All right, let me grab the questions. Yeah, here we go. Okay, yes, great, you see me. Hi guys, hi Rebecca, hi Jenna. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to our December live stream and for being cool with it just being me this month. Things just got a little crazy towards the end of the year, and it seemed easier to just do it myself than try and schedule actors. And also, I just wanted an opportunity to talk to you guys at the end of the year, kind of one-on-one, without the distraction of those actor types, and just say thank you so much for being our patrons and for supporting us and encouraging us and being part of our team. It means the world to us, and truly, 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 we would not be able to make the show without you guys. So thank you so, so much. If you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I've got a couple that people have sent in and also ones that I've sort of saved from past live streams because they've been too me specific to answer in group live streams. But then also I'm just gonna sort of talk about where we're at in the show right now. So to start off, we just like 2 hours ago wrapped the season, or not the season, the first half of the season. As I explained in kind of my writing post the other day, this season and last season have both been 16 episodes that are divided into 8 episode arcs. So part A of the season was episode 41 through 48, and then part B will be 49 through 56. I think that's how math works. And we just finished recording 48 2 hours ago. So I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. You guys may have seen on Twitter and or Instagram that we actually recorded part of it in like on my bed, because it's a scene where Mark and Sam are sort of both like not sleeping, and so they're kind of talking in bed. And that's not really a spoiler. It's not a huge spoiler. And I had been talking to Jordana Williams, who directed Steal the Stars, which if you guys have not listened to Steal the Stars yet, go do that. It's incredible. It's 12 or 13 episodes, sci-fi, romance, noir. It's amazing. And Jordana and I met at the WNYC Women in Podcasting Festival back in September, October. It's been a long fall of a lot of events. And we got lunch, and sort of I picked her brain about how she was recording Steal the Stars. And I was like, oh, all those scenes that you guys have in bed feel so real, and they're so compelling and, you know, intimate and wonderful. And I was like, how did you guys record that? Yeah, Steal the Stars, that's what it's called. And it's by Tor Labs, so kind of an offshoot of Tor Books, the big sci-fi publisher. So definitely worth listening to. And it is like there's a sort of romantic relationship at the center of it. And they have all these great scenes. And I was asking her how she recorded them, and she's like, oh, we actually lay down on the floor and recorded it that way. I was like, huh, okay, that could be interesting. So today, Misha came over to help us. Normally, I kind of run all of the recordings, just 2 people, just by myself. And so we recorded some stuff with Andrew and Julia earlier in the day, and then Misha came over and they kind of helped us figure out how to record while lying down. Because the thing that Jordana pointed out to me, yes, definitely go subscribe, Ricky. It's amazing. The thing that Jordana pointed out to me was that people sound different when they're lying down. Like your voice physically sounds different. And in order to capture that, they actually lay down and they actually kind of did some of the action. And this is something that Misha and I have been talking about for a long time, how we would love to kind of do it live, as it were, like actually treat making a podcast like making a TV show or a movie where you are able to move around and have blockings, or like live theater. So that's what we did today, which is super fun. And I think it's going to sound really great. Oh, Jenna, I hope your internet continues to work, sending all the good vibes and Wi-Fi, happiness to you. Yeah, so and it was really funny because we lay down and Andrew was like, "Oh wow, this is a really comfortable bed," and I was like, "It's a Casper mattress," which is one of our sponsors. So we're gonna be able to say that that episode was in part recorded on a Casper mattress, which I would say is a pretty good endorsement for Casper as far as podcast endorsements go. So that was really fun, and I think it's gonna turn out really cool. That's episode 48. That'll be coming out in January, January 24th, so the end of January. And then we take a month off for February, and we'll be back March 8th with episode 49. So it feels good because I have done basically all of my dialogue edits up until 47, and just need to do the dialogue edits for 48, and then kind of I'm done with the production sides of things for part A, and I can focus on continuing to write part B, which is really nice. Because typically the way that the workflow goes, for those of you that don't know, is that I'll write the episodes, I write all the episodes myself, as you all know, and then usually the first people that goes out to is the cast, the people who are actually in that episode. The cast, not all of the cast gets all the scripts. And then I'll wait to hear any feedback from them. I'll also email it over to my sister, who's a psychologist, Elizabeth Laird, who has been helping me since the beginning with it. I'd like to get her kind of her gut check on things now, even though we're kind of out of the therapy room and I don't need necessarily her professional expertise. I still really value her opinion as just like a person who consumes and media and has amazing taste. So those people will get the script first, and then I'll kind of do edits. And then I'll usually send it over to Misha too as like a little heads up so that they sort of know what's going into it. But if it's not an episode that they're involved with the recording of, I'll just schedule the recording myself and we'll come to this space. You can see the bit of my old mattress that's there, because after I got my Casper, I was like, I have this old mattress that's still pretty good. And I don't really necessarily want to get rid of it because it'd be cool to like pull out when I have guests over and stuff when people come visit. And then I texted Misha and I was like, would this make a difference in soundproofing my room if we had it in the closet and I was able to just slide the doors? And they said yes. And so that's what that's about. So we record in here, and then I will edit all the dialogue and send those edits over to Misha. Misha will give me a first draft of the sound design, and we'll kind of go back and forth for usually like 2 or 3 tops. Sometimes it's more than that, but they usually kind of get it right on the first try. Or more often than not, if there are notes, it's because they followed exactly my script notes. And then I hear it and I'm like, that's actually not what I wanted. I need to explain this a little bit better. So usually any notes that are given is because I didn't know exactly what kind of sound thing I wanted. And then once we settle on like a final sound design thing, Misha bounces it back to me. I record the credits and the ads, bounce it over to Evan, our composer, who then gives me the final draft, usually like day of, or the day before the episode goes up, with all of the music and kind of mastered and cleaned and all that kind of stuff. So it's a nice little workflow, and there definitely is always a period in every part of the season where I'm writing episodes, recording episodes, and editing dialogue, and then also releasing episodes. So I'm really glad that that part is almost over for me. I'm hoping to have 48 edited by the end of this week, and then off to Misha, and then I can just focus on writing. That would have been a really great product placement for Casper. Sadly, we were not yet recording. We didn't get Andrew's genuine reaction to how comfortable the Casper mattress was when he laid down for the first time. But I think I will, depending on who our sponsor is that week. I feel like it actually might be Casper, but I'm not totally sure. I have some of the ad stuff for. It's not going to be a Casper mattress week. So it'll be a little bit weird to promo that in the episode, but yeah, that would have been pretty funny. So Ricky asks, so there's really not a huge gap of time between writing, production, and publication, right? Do you prefer a quicker turnaround for your work schedule to stay motivated and productive? It's a great question. Yeah, I do like working under deadline. To an extent, I think that our production schedule is pretty grueling all the time. It was the worst in season 2 because Misha didn't come on as sound designer until episode 17, which is about halfway through season 2. Season 2 is episodes 10 through 24. And that was when we were releasing weekly. And we did 20 episodes that season. So that was rough. That was the spring of, like, the sort of winter spring of 2015, 2016. And that was very, very grueling. That was a really, really hard thing. And I mean, thankfully, like, the episodes were a little bit shorter then, and we didn't have as big of a cast, so there wasn't as many moving parts to put together. But definitely moving to sort of an every other week schedule. Yeah, weekly was insane. I never want to do that again, unless, I would love to do sort of like mini series that are like 13 episodes, and it's over the course of 13 weeks, and everything is recorded and edited before we even release the first episode. That's the way to do that, I think. But we just jumped right into season 2 when I had like 3 episodes written. So it was very much like, I think our fastest turnaround that season was like 2 weeks from writing to release. I remember there was like, I think it may have been the Sam and Chloe episodes, episode 19 or something. It may have been earlier than that, because Misha would have already been on board at that point. I mean, they could have done that fast turnaround, but yeah, I think sort of 2 to 3 weeks was the fastest turnaround in season 2, and never again. Now we're really nicely sort of ahead of schedule. I mean, 48 comes out end of January, and we're wrapped on recording on that, which is great. And 49 is almost being done written. 50 is being done written, because we're doing something a little bit different and weird, and it's going to be a little bit more production heavy. So we needed to get that ball rolling a while ago. So I actually started writing episode 50 in August. And we've sort of been working about how exactly to record that and to go about doing that, because it involves more production, like I said. And yeah, we'll see. Okay, Mackenzie asks, do you at least have an outline for the whole season before you started, or was most writing on the fly? For season 2, it was really on the fly. So season 2 begins with Damien's entrance. And that episode was written and recorded before I watched Jessica Jones. Some of you have heard the story before. And then I watched Jessica Jones, and I was like, oh, okay. So I can't do that anymore. And so Damien's character's changed. So that kind of changed the trajectory of the season somewhat. But initially, the end of the second season was supposed to be, spoilers for season 3 of Bright Sessions, was supposed to be the confrontation that happens between Caleb and Damien was supposed to happen at the end of season 2. And initially, Damien was gonna not come out of that necessarily. And then we were all just sitting around one day. I think it must have been for like a production meeting or a read through. We don't really do those a lot, but I sort of had people over, and we were sitting in the living room, and Charlie was like, I was sort of talking about the arc of the season, and I was like, all right, here's what it's going to be. We're going to get Chloe kind of involved, and she's going to meet Damien and kind of going to explore that to him, and she's going to meet Sam. It's going to be all of our atypical starting to meet. Caleb and Adam finally get together, and they start to sort of figure out exactly how to be a half atypical couple in sort of an atypical world. And then it's going to end with this confrontation between Caleb and Damien, and then with Dr. Bright and Sam and Chloe breaking Mark out of the AM. Naturally, as that changed, as you guys know, because Charlie, I was sort of explaining this to them. I had that basic outline. The way I like to think about my outlines, the way that I like to describe them, is that I always have a target that I'm aiming for, but how I get there can change. And this was one of those rare occasions in which the target that I was aiming for basically changed, because Charlie was like, God, wouldn't it be cool if like Damien was involved in the breakout? Like we kind of like this heist episode. And I was like, that would be cool. Because initially the breakout was supposed to happen entirely off screen, as it were. Like we weren't going to hear any of it. And Chloe was kind of going to be more involved in it than she was. And that completely changed the trajectory of season 2, certainly the back half. And then ultimately really, really changed the trajectory of the whole series, because then Damien was on the run with Mark, and then their dynamic totally changed things and kind of like changed the way that Mark came back into the fold, and how quickly he's recovered and stuff like that. So it's, yeah, like listen to your actors. They have some great ideas sometimes. And it was just one of those things of like, wouldn't it be cool if, and then it just was a little earworm, and I couldn't quite get rid of that idea. And that's what sort of turned into season 2. For the last 2 seasons, so season 3 and then this season, I've had a little bit more of a clear outline, because now we have a cast of 12 people. And so, it really matters which characters are in which episode. Things need to be planned out a little bit more. It can't be quite as haphazard as it used to be, because we just have more schedules to manage and we have a budget and all that kind of stuff, because everybody's getting paid, which you guys enable, which is incredible. But we still have to make sure that we're using all of that money well. So yeah, I definitely have kind of a target, and I have things that I know I want to do. Like, I don't remember exactly when in the process. Oh, Jenna, I'm so sorry that your internet is crapping out. But yes, we will be here later. So definitely make sure to watch it, because it will be here. But have a good night. So with season 4, I think it was sometime over the summer when I was kind of planning. I started planning season 4 back in probably like March or April. It was around the time that we were recording and prepping the season 3 finale recording. So that kind of big studio recording that we did. I was starting to write season 4. And I think it was like halfway through the summer where I was like, oh, I think I want to do character episodes. I think I want to kind of focus on these characters' perspectives a little bit more, and make sort of bookend each part A and part B with these episodes, and then see kind of what happens in the middle with telling one story from a bunch of different perspectives. And there are certain like emotional confrontations that I knew I wanted to happen. And so it's really been about kind of just getting to those points in whatever way I can. So that's my version of an outline, basically, is like, what characters do I want to be in what thing? How many episodes are there going to be? What's the end goal? And what are the emotional confrontations that I want to happen along the way? Jenna is no longer here, but I will answer her question anyway, because she'll be able to watch this later. Did I do NaNoWriMo? I did do NaNoWriMo. I'm working on something Bright Sessions related in book form that I have a first draft for, which desperately needs to be edited. It is like a real first draft. I think someone was telling me, like, Barbara Kingsolver has a quote saying, you know, she always starts at -100 pages whenever she starts a book, because that's how many pages, you know, it's going to take you to actually find out what your story is. And I feel like that's what happened with this, where I was sort of about 180, 200 pages in, and I was like, oh, now I understand the book that I'm writing. Okay, cool. But yeah, I've been working on it kind of for the past year, and then use NaNoWriMo to really kind of drive it home and finish it up. And that's, oh no, Rebecca, don't choke on your water. Yeah, there have been a couple of things that I've wanted to explore in book form. And I want to be able to say more about that, especially to you guys, because you are my inner circle. I don't think I can yet. But yes, you may be reading a Bright Sessions book someday, or potentially Bright Sessions books. And this is partly because I'm having a lot of fun playing in this world and playing these characters, and partly because there are some things that we just don't really get to explore in the podcast, in the same way that like any potential TV show would be a really fun way to explore kind of the bigger world. And with the books potentially, it's like really interior. So really diving into like certain characters, like inner lives, or certain characters' backstories. It won't be a book series necessarily. It's sort of like character portraits, if anything. And the one that I just finished actually started back in 2015. Yeah, because I was writing the first season, which will be a giveaway about which character it's about. It's going to be about one of those 4 characters. And I was writing this one character's plotline. I've talked about this before online, so you could find what I'm talking about, but I'm going to keep it secret. Talking about sort of, I was working out this one character's plotline. I was like, I want to explore this in a different form. I want to kind of dig deeper into this character's thought process, and also kind of dig deeper into like a couple of other ancillary characters that are mentioned in the podcast that we don't necessarily meet in that first season. And so I started writing this just like YA book, because I was like, I want to sort of explore this, and actually sent it to the actor who plays this character as kind of their like with the mixtape and with a bunch of other things that when I first cast this person to sort of be like, here's some more information about this character that you might want to know. So it's interesting that it's like I've finished it now, and it's been fun to like kind of go back to that character's earlier part of their journey. Yes, I did finish one. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm proud of me too, and I'm proud of all of you for all who I know are doing NaNoWriMo or did NaNoWriMo, because it is, it's hard. It is hard to write 50,000 words in a month. It was exhausting. And the end result is like I said, very rough first draft, but I'm excited to potentially share it one day. And then I have a couple of other ideas noodling around that I would love to do in book form, because there are things that we're not going to be able to explore in the podcast because of format and because of where we are in the story and all that kind of stuff, and what I want that story to be in the podcast, so it's fun to like explore in other mediums. Let me see. Have some water. Okay, so Ricky said, spontaneity and collaboration important to you as a creator. I know you write the episodes yourself, but it seems like the input from your actors when interesting ideas come in the moment has a huge impact on your story. That is totally true. Yeah, I really lean on my actors a lot. They're all very good friends and incredibly talented people, as you guys know. And so I really like to kind of check with them about stuff. So over the hiatus between season 3 and season 4, I sent an email to the cast sort of saying like, I'd love to get coffee with all of you guys, or, you can email me, or we can talk on the phone to sort of talk about like what you would want your character to experience in season 4. Because like I have some ideas, but I know you guys have some ideas, so let's talk about it. And so we did that, and I think the one that really ended up being a much bigger thing that I had initially intended was I got coffee with Andrew, and he was like, I feel like there's been a lot of references to Mark drinking scotch. Like that could be like addiction and alcoholism could be something interesting to explore. And they had some ideas beyond that will become relevant later that I'm not going to tell you about. But it was a great moment because it was one of those things where I had all of my ideas that I was going to tell Andrew of like, here's what I envisioned for Mark in season 4. But before I did that, I was like, I want to hear your ideas because I want to influence what you have in your head by what I have planned. I don't want you to be boxed in by what I'm doing. And one of the things that I had was Mark struggling with a drinking problem. And so it was just one of those nice moments of like, oh, like me and my actors are really on the same page. And that's happened a lot. I think Charlie is probably the person, as I've said before, who surprises me the most. And it's not always, that's sort of him being involved in rescuing Mark was definitely an idea that Charlie had that he like sort of posited as an idea or as like a story concept. Everything else that Charlie's influenced that's sort of been the only idea that he's really voiced that has been like a very clear kind of plot-based thing. But certainly the way that Charlie approaches Damien and the way that he interacts with other characters has hugely influenced that character, and as a result, hugely influenced other characters. So yeah, that's he's been a huge influence. I mean, obviously Julia, like she asks so many questions about Dr. Bright. She will kind of tell me how she's thinking about a certain scene or a certain line. She'll sort of say like, well, I was thinking about this. And sometimes, it aligns, sometimes it doesn't align with what I have. But usually if it doesn't align with what I have, I'm like, yes, that's better. You should do that. And that will inevitably change, what we do going forward. And I think so much of the way that my actors influence me is the chemistry between actors. Because you can have the most talented actors in the world, but if they're not really connecting to each other, then it's not really gonna work. Kujos, yes, he does have an influence. I know, Charlie is like the nice, good guy version of Damien, where he's very influential, but it's all positive. But my actors, because so many of us have worked together in class settings or in various other things. Yes, the chemistry between Damien and Mark was surprising to all of us, I think. But that's what I mean. It's like, I think it's partly because Charlie literally has chemistry with everybody. And the first time when we recorded his first episode, I was like, oh man, I don't want to go down this road with Damien. Like, I don't want it to be a Kilgrave. I don't want to sort of introduce like a gendered or like sexual like violence into this at all. So I really steered hard away from that with both him and Dr. Bright and him and Chloe. Not that that's the vibe that Charlie was bringing to it, but just when you have somebody like Damien who has like a romantic sexual chemistry with somebody, questions of consent are naturally going to come up, and you can't really consent. With Chloe, that was something that I wanted to explore a lot more, and just like but their plot lines kind of ended up diverging in a way that I wasn't expecting to because of Damien being involved in Mark's rescue. Because what I love about Damien and Chloe, which is the same thing I love about Damien and Mark, is that they are sort of on an even playing field, which isn't the case with Damien and Dr. Bright, but is the case with Damien and Wadsworth. So it's sort of been about putting him with people who he's on even footing with. And then what's been an interesting discovery is that like Damien doesn't see it as even footing when it's someone like Wadsworth, who's just completely immune to him. And therefore, like, he doesn't have the power, and it feels like it doesn't feel like even footing, versus somebody like Mark. Like, the reason I think he feels so strongly about Mark is because Mark can share his power, and it can be on an even footing while having power, which is really where Damien wants to be. But I think that I remember recording episode 27, which is Damien and Mark's first episode, with Andrew and Charlie, and just like we got through the first take, and I was like, huh, I didn't necessarily see this coming. So that's been one of those things that's been really fun to explore, and that's been really fun to kind of like write towards, even though like it's a very complex and toxic relationship. Just sort of like leaning on that chemistry and letting them kind of take my scripts and put so much sort of subtext and nuance in it has been really, really fun. And that's happened a bunch of times, and not just with Charlie. I think that the chemistry, a different kind of chemistry, but a chemistry nonetheless, between Julia and Andrew, where like kind of putting them together as siblings, and the first scene that they have after Mark comes back and he and Joan go into Joan's office, I just fell in love with Julia and Andrew's dynamic in that, because it brought out like a real sort of softness and humor to Dr. Bright that like I didn't even necessarily write in there. Like I wanted Mark to bring out her sort of softer, looser side, but I think that just because of the relationship that Andrew and Julia have, like he was able to do that a lot more, and she kind of she like focuses him. So that's a dynamic that we recorded more scenes with them today. And that's a dynamic that I also, just based on actor chemistry, have had a ton of fun just exploring and writing more of, because I could watch this two pretend to be siblings all day. Like there's just such convincing siblings, and it just feels so real and really loving, but at times very, very difficult. And so that's been another relationship that I've really loved to explore. And then also like me and Julia, like the friendship that kind of like blossomed between Dr. Bright and Sam was not something that I had ever intended. And just working with Julia and kind of like exploring our own chemistry that we had and kind of what we bring out in each other as people and as actors kind of led to that, and those are the really nice things. And that's why I don't necessarily like to write seasons way in advance and then record them and release them, because I like to have the flexibility of like, okay, so like these directors have a lot of chemistry, so that's going to slightly change scripts down the line, and I want to have more scenes with them. And that's not always possible, but I definitely like having the flexibility to do that. Sibling dynamics are underappreciated. I agree. And yeah, Dr. Bright has opened up a lot more. It's true. She is a lot warmer. I think it's in episode 43 with Caleb sort of says to Caleb, like, it's like, walking around with an open wound all the time, having Mark back. It makes her vulnerable. It makes her, it's kind of a scary thing, but at the same time, it's like the vulnerability is really what makes her human and what helps her character grow. Okay, so Jordan, speaking of your characters, Damien especially, the vibe I got from your podcast was that you really, really cared for your characters. How do you balance their autonomy and your own desire to care for them without going overboard and like being brutal to them? That's a really great question, Jordan. I feel like I maybe have been a little bit brutal to them. It is a careful balance. I think that I do care for them, and I think for me, the thing that I always that I always want to do is help them grow. And so that's not always going to mean treating them badly. But it's also not always going to mean like making things really easy for them, because ease rarely leads to growth. Um, if you're in a happy, sort of satisfied, content place, you're probably not going to grow all that much as a person. And that's something that I think, in making these characters grow, they've definitely a lot of time grown out of not necessarily like brutal pain and trauma, though some of them absolutely have, but out of just struggle. I think that that's really what the whole show's about, is just about sort of like human struggle. And so I think for me, in caring for these people, I never want to put them through unnecessary pain, with some exceptions. I think I've put Damien through some unnecessary pain. Um, well, no, but it's not necessarily. It's not unnecessary. It's maybe not exactly what he needed, but it's what he deserved. And I think with like Caleb is a person that I really hate hurting. Same thing with Adam, but at the same time, it's like they're 17. Like no matter what happens to them, things are going to hurt sometimes, because that's just, you're kind of a massive spectrum when you're that age. And then for people like Mark and Sam, it's like, okay, they've had these sort of real, almost physical traumas enacted on them, like massive psychological trauma. And for Sam, so much of her character is actually treating her well to help her grow. She's sort of a weird exception to this, and it's actually the same thing with Frank. Both Sam and Frank need happiness and contentment to make them grow, because they've been through so much, obviously very different things, but they've both been through so much that that's their normal. And so the happiness throws them off balance. I think that's, if you guys haven't noticed, balance is a real theme in the show and in my life and in Sam. And I think that that's a huge thing that applies to all of them. Whereas like Damien is somebody who has so much power and has so much privilege, and so taking that away from him and knocking off balance is going to force him to grow, ideally. Whether or not it actually does force him to grow is another thing. Sam and Frank are people who have had a lot of trauma and a lot of heartache, and so putting them into a happier place throws them off balance because they're not used to it. So I think that that's really what it comes down to, is like caring for these characters through balance and through like real, honest emotion. I never want to hurt anyone just for hurting's sake. And obviously, like, we're dealing with extraordinary circumstances, and like Mark was experimented on, Frank was experimented on, Sam lost her parents in a tragic accident. Like, these are very kind of like larger than life things. But the emotion sort of that it spurs and that it comes from is I think hopefully true and honest. I hope that answers your question. That was a really, really good question. I'm going to think about that for a while. Yes, overcompensation is definitely a thing. They are all my children, but I appreciate seeing them banged up a bit, as long as we get to the comfort side of that hurt comfort. Yes. Get a little hurt, learn a little lesson. Exactly. And that leads to a question from the comments. Heather asked, let's see, what are your go-to books, shows, movies, other texts when you need writing inspiration? And I was thinking about this, and for me, like, the number one answer is always Stephen Sondheim musicals. I listened to, I'm also glad that I didn't kill Damien. He's ended up being a really interesting character, and I love working with Charlie. So that's been really great. I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did. But yeah, so Stephen Sondheim is a musical theater composer that I'm obsessed with. I've always been obsessed with. And there's always an answer to a question or a lack of inspiration that I have in his music. And I feel like the sort of the lesson of get a little hurt, learn a little lesson is very much at the center of a lot of his shows. And they're very human shows, and they're really about people's relationships and what people do to each other out of love or out of selfishness or selflessness, and kind of just the ways in which we can be each other's own worst enemies, and he'll put people in sort of these, again, like larger than life situations, like Into the Woods, which is all fairy tales, or Sweeney Todd, which is about a murderous barber and a woman who makes pies with people, and sort of these outlandish things. But ultimately, the struggles in his shows are about human beings. So that's a place that I draw a lot of inspiration. I feel like that's a lesson that I learned from him. And certainly in regards to Damien, the musical Passion, which is about this like very twisted love affair, was something that I listened to like on repeat while writing all of the Mark Damien episodes, because that's something that there's a lot to be said in there about sort of like toxic love and all-consuming love, and love that is deeply, deeply selfish, which I think is something that's just fascinating and really, really fun to write, and sort of comes to a head in episode 48. So I'm excited about that. Rebecca, when I write, I often find that my characters do things and say things that I don't expect. Sometimes I don't know that something about them is true until a character says it. Does that happen to you? Yes, I'm so glad that I'm not the only person that happens to. That happens to me all the time, and it's so funny because sometimes I'll like kind of just snap awake at like 1 a.m. and go to my computer and write a scene that like just occurred to me, and then go back to bed, and I'll then like get up the next day and I'll look at what I wrote, and usually I don't remember it at all, but it's usually like pretty true to what I would want to do, even if like I don't remember writing it. And I think what's funny is that sometimes I'll be doing that. I'll be scrolling through the script and I'll be like, oh yeah, I want to have, I'm like reading it aloud in my head, or sometimes just reading it aloud. And I'll read a line, I'll be like, oh, this character should say this next. And because I'm thinking about it more consciously, and then it's like I've already written that line because that character was just sort of writing themselves. I don't know if that makes sense. But yes, that does happen to me. And certainly there have been times when I've gotten to the end of a script and I'm like, that didn't go how I thought it was going to go. And that character did not say the thing that I was trying to get them to say, and that they couldn't say it. Or sometimes, character dynamics are really, really different. Like we have an episode coming up, episode 47, in which 2 characters that like have sort of interacted before, but not really interacted before, interact a little bit more. And I remember getting to the end of that, writing that script and being like, these characters don't get along. And it was kind of heartbreaking because they're 2 characters that I love a lot and that are very near and dear to me and like parts of me. And I was like, they don't get along. Why is that? That's fascinating. And it's still something I'm unpacking because we only recorded that like recently, and it was kind of interesting to see it enacted. Yeah, it was really bizarre. And I remember texting someone about it and being like, so like, this is a weird thing, but this character and this character don't like each other, I think. And my actor was like, oh, that's really weird. I wouldn't have expected that. I was like, neither would have I. But that's just sometimes how it happens. So that's something that that I totally, totally relate to, for sure. All right, I'm gonna go back into my spreadsheet for more questions. We've got about 20 minutes left, so keep those questions coming. Let me see if I've missed anything. I don't think so. Oh yeah, PodCon. Oh, excuse me. Papa asked about PodCon. PodCon was so great. We met some of you there, which was amazing. And delightful time. Like, all podcast people are great, like creators and fans alike. So for those of you that don't know, me, Brigham, Julia, and Anna all went up to PodCon in Seattle. This was 2 weeks ago. Oh man, I'm so glad you guys had a good time. It was just so fun. It was run by Jeffrey Craner and Joseph Fink of Night Vale, Hank Green, and the McElroy brothers. And it was like 2 days of panels and live shows and workshops and signings and creator hangouts and meetups and all sorts of things. And it was just like, it was a whirlwind of just like beautiful, loving times. I'm still like recovering from a cold that I got there, but that's always the way that it is with cons. You always leave with some sort of virus. But yeah, we did our Q&A, which so many people were at. We ran out of time to answer questions. I think some of you were there. And all the questions were so great, and the panel got like really real. Like we really got into it. Like we were crying at one point. Like I kind of went on a rant about like violence and like toxic masculinity. It went there. But what was amazing is that like everybody in the audience went with us and was just like such a wonderful, supportive community to speak in front of. And 30 out of 30 photo with Griffin was so sweet and pure. Yeah, he was so nice. He was really, really nice. I went up to him and was like, I'm your usurper. I didn't actually say that, but it was really fun. I'm so glad you guys teared up. Also, but sorry that I made you tear up. Yeah, it was so much fun. And like right before our Q&A, I did a podcast scramble with Drew Ackerman, who makes Sleep With Me, which is an amazing podcast that's like meant to lull you to sleep. And we talked about the responsibility of vulnerability, of like the sort of the responsibility you have is to both yourself and your audience when you're making something that is sort of coming into people's like most intimate moments, like sleep or therapy. And that also got very real and was very beautiful. We wrote letters for our characters, and like his totally made me cry. I wrote a letter to Adam, and like it was like much more emotional to read out loud than I thought it would be. So I'm glad that you guys were there and that you were also tearing up at our panel, our Q&A, and that they were good tears, because they were good tears for us too. We had, by the end of the weekend, we were like, we want to be here forever. Like, can we do this every weekend? So I really, thank you so much, Ricky. I'm so glad that you liked those letters. It was honestly, that was, I think, one of my highlights was doing that podcast scramble with Drew. Like it was just so, like, he's just the nicest dude. Like, and that is, I feel like I was just a broken record the entire weekend. Like Anna and I were staying in the same room, and we would like take the elevator up after getting drinks with people or hanging out with people, and be like, that person is just the nicest person. And it was just like this mantra we were saying all weekend, because truly, like, I don't have a bad word to say about anybody I met there, about any podcaster I've interacted with. It's just such a wonderful community. It was so awesome to like meet Paul Bay in person finally. He's such a gem. It was so great to hang out with like Jeffrey and Joseph and Cecil and Dylan and all the Night Vale folks again. It was just a great time, guys. So next year, if it happens again, which fingers crossed it does, and fingers crossed that we get to go, I'd love to see more of you there and get to spend more time with all of you. Because it was definitely a thing where like I always overestimate what I can accomplish at cons, but it really was like one thing after the other. It was crazy. Oh, Jen, you skipped ma'am to come to us. That's so sweet. I know, we were all so bummed when we saw the schedule. We're like, we wanted to go to my brother and me, and we can't because we're going to be giving a Q&A. But I listened to the episode after the fact, and it was really, really funny. Yeah, so I'm so glad that you guys were all there. Bookmarked page, not a question, but I just love that the empath of the group is a teenage boy in a world that makes it hard for men to acknowledge and deal with emotions. Thank you. Yeah, that is really, really important to me. Yeah, I just really feel strongly about masculinity and toxic masculinity and male emotion, because I think that men should be able to feel emotion and should be able to express it in a way that is healthy, and be able to cry and talk about their feelings and be vulnerable and all those things. And yeah, so writing Caleb is a real treat, and getting to have Brigham take that character on has been such an incredible privilege of mine. Like, he just has adopted that character in such a beautiful way. Oh, that was a thing that I was going to say earlier when we were talking about sort of character influence, and somebody else asked, let's see, Beth asked which actors have had the biggest influence on how you've written their characters and in what ways. And like, that's sort of a hard question to answer, because it's sort of like a chicken and egg, it's like what influenced what, and how much of it is coming from the actor and how much of it is coming from me, and how much of it's just already there organically. But certainly, I mean, Charlie's had the biggest influence on Damien sort of sticking around and being a fully dimensional human being, because Charlie plays him like a fully dimensional human being, as he should, and I should have made him that from the beginning, and I didn't, had course corrected quickly. But something I was going to say earlier when I was talking about like actor influence and sort of the me and my actors having the same ideas about things a lot of the time. A weird thing that happened with Brigham recently was, this was episode 47. which is the episode from Adam's perspective. And so it's obviously has like a lot of Adam and Caleb in it. And they have like, they don't have like a fight, but they sort of like get into like a little bit of an argument about something. And Brigham was telling me, he's like, it's so weird because the argument that they have in this is so similar to an argument that James, his fiance, and I have a lot. He was like, I've never talked to you about this aspect of mine and James' relationship, and yet here you wrote it for me. So it's like, I think that oftentimes there's so much when it comes to actor influence. There's just so much stuff that is subconsciously there that they just kind of put into their characters that then I subconsciously absorb and then subconsciously put into the character. Because you get weird stuff like that where an actor will be like, or even what Anna was saying during our Q&A, like when that first question I asked, like, what's been your favorite part of season 4? And she was like, well, I started sobbing during an episode. It was episode 45. And it was the part where she's talking about, like, I've tried everything. I've tried meditation. I've tried listening to music, all these things. And that was something that, like, when I was writing it, I wasn't even consciously thinking about Anna, despite the fact that we have talked about mental health before and that we have talked about our own personal struggles and things. But it was just something that felt so natural for Chloe in that moment, and that I had no idea at the time was going to be so impactful for Anna and kind of where she was. So yeah, the influence question is a hard one because it really does kind of go round and round. And it's sort of this never ending loop of influence. Leslie, how did you decide which character would get which power? Love that the powers aren't perfectly matched their personalities as is traditional in like superhero films. Yeah, how did I decide that? I think for the original 3, so for Sam, Caleb, and Chloe, it was sort of like, okay, what's going to be, well, for Sam, it was really just the fact that like I have panic attacks and thought it would be interesting if when I had a panic attack, I went somewhere else. And sort of where I was going changed over the course of like the year before I actually started writing the show. So I was imagining Sam Barnes in my head. But I eventually settled on time travel, and then sort of the specifics of how her power works grew out of like, okay, what would be the most frustrating thing for me? Like the best thing would be to go back in time and get to watch stuff and not really be there. Like just sort of, be this invisible ghost. And then thinking about that, because that would calm me down, being alone and being isolated in another time, in another place. But then eventually as I was building her character, I was like, oh, that provides a whole other layer of sort of like psychological distress because she's alone for so long. So then that kind of is where like her agoraphobia came from, which is not something that I have. And so that was sort of like just a process of discovery, I think. Whereas for Caleb, I knew I wanted to write like a teenage boy because, as I said, I feel very strongly about male emotion, and I think teenage boys especially, particularly like hyper masculine kind of jock boys. I went to school with a lot of those guys and did not have good friend relationships of any kind with that type of person. And so I really wanted to explore like what was going on in that person's head. It's like looking at kind of the meatheady, like brute type jocks in my high school and thinking about like, okay, no, they probably have rich inner lives. They probably have insecurities. They probably aren't just bullies. And then so thinking like, okay, well, what I want to write that character. I want to write a super kind of meathead jock character, bro type, because that is the opposite of who I am. And that could be interesting. And then I was like, okay, what's going to be the most interesting thing to give him? Empathy. Cause like that totally turns the tables on everything. Like a guy who's hyper masculine, who's been told sort of by society and by his classmates to toughen up and not feel and not cry and not show weakness, has to feel everything. I thought that'd be so interesting to explore. And then, so with Caleb, the character came first and then the power. And then with Chloe, I knew I wanted to explore mind reader because I was like, that's the power that I see so often in superhero movies and TV shows and comics and stuff where the person's just like listening in and they hear what they need to hear and then they snap out of it and they're like, all right, I got it. And I'm like, it would be great if you could control your mind reading power. What if you couldn't? Then it's like, that would just be a nightmare, right? And I was like, who would it be fun to give that to? And I knew that I wanted to write something for Anna. And I was like, Anna has sort of this like, she's not quite as like wide-eyed, naive, optimistic as Chloe is at all. But she has sort of this like relentless spirit. It's not necessarily like an optimism or positivity, although she is like a positive person, but she just has this spirit that like just cannot be crushed. And she's just so strong, and also kind of this like artsy hippie type. And so that could be really interesting to give somebody who is kind of artsy and freewheeling, but then also relentlessly optimistic and kind of this flower child, a power that exposes all of the underbelly of humanity constantly, and like a constant barrage of noise. Like, what would that do to somebody like Chloe? And yeah, so for them, it really was like trying to figure out what's going to be the most interesting personality type to put with this power in a way that it didn't match, in a way that it was like, what's going to be the biggest contrast, and how is that going to provide struggle and growth for these people? And then for Mark, I think, you've seen her dance marathon, she cannot be stopped. It's true. She's an unstoppable force. For Mark, I think that was more of like a plot based reason, I guess, of like, okay, he would have to have something that the AM really would want. There would also need to be a reason where he's like, he's not a time travel, but he's stuck. So what would be the reason for that? But then also I think, the fact that Dr. Bright works with atypicals and isn't an atypical herself, and then has a brother who, when he's not around atypicals, is a totally normal dude. But then he has the capacity to be hugely, hugely powerful, and kind of the struggle that provides for him. And I think also just the fact that like Mark is sort of this charming guy who pleases everybody and likes everybody, and everybody likes him. Sort of at his height. I think now he's pretty beaten down, and he's had a hard couple of years. So he's not necessarily at the top of his personality game. It's interesting to give him a power that like needs other people to thrive. And then Damien was just I wanted a villain. And then I also wanted to make a commentary on like what lifelong privilege will do to a person who doesn't engage with that privilege in like a what's the word I'm looking for? Productive way. Because I think that like, privilege isn't something that you get to choose, right? Like privilege is something that you are born with based on where you're born, who you're born as, what you're able to do, and it's like Damien's privilege is not his fault. He has his ability and there's nothing he can do about it. But I think where privilege becomes really dangerous, and I think the negative results of privilege that we've seen have been people who have a great deal of privilege and therefore a great deal of power and don't engage with it in any kind of way that will cause them to grow or think about other human beings. And I think that's really where Damien is he, after a certain point, stopped engaging in his own privilege and sort of became this person who is incredibly selfish and incredibly lazy. That's been the fun thing with Damien. Who else in the show has powers? Oh, Rose. Rose was a character that I came up with a while back because of a thing that I wanted to do. I'm trying to explain this without spoiling anything. Because of a thing that I wanted to do that I wasn't sure I was ever going to be able to do. And so I introduced her as kind of like a ringer, because I was like, all right, I want this power for this specific thing, and I'm not quite sure that we'll ever get to it. So I'm going to put her in here to illustrate Agent Green. She's first introduced in Agent Green's episode, and I wanted to illustrate that he actually does care about people and about the atypicals he sort of inducts into the AM. But yeah, her power was chosen for a specific reason that may or may not become clear. I don't know if we'll get to that thing. So we'll have to wait and see. But there will be more Rose for sure, because now I just like her as a character. But certainly in the beginning, she was chosen and her power was chosen for a very specific, very theoretical reason. All right, so we've got 5 minutes left. So if you guys have any other questions, throw into the chat. If not, I will pick one from the spreadsheet that I have. Let's see. Does Dr. White have a latent zero power? Is just awaiting for fan fiction? I think that's a great thing to explore in fan fiction. She does not. I will confirm that she does not have a latent power. She is 100% human being. Same thing with Adam. I know that that's something that people wonder about, or if there's like a reason that like Adam and Caleb, you know, fell in love. Did Adam's parents do something to him, et cetera, et cetera? No, Adam and Dr. Bright are just normal human beings who happen to have these atypical people in her life. With Dr. Bright and Mark, yes, it is kind of strange that that her brother has a power and she doesn't, but it's the way I think about it, sort of atypical genetics, is that it is like a mutation, basically. Like it's you know, sort of it can be both like a recessive gene, and in the same way that, like, you know, your sort of DNA mapping can be quite different from your siblings. That's kind of what happened with Dr. Bright and Mark. So I cannot confirm their parents were not atypical, but I cannot confirm or deny if they had any atypicals in the rest of their heritage. But yeah, she does not have a power, neither does Adam. Normies are important. It's true. Key, I asked this comment, but I'll throw it here too. If Damien were to be represented by a tarot card, would he be the magician or the devil or something else? I am not super familiar with tarot cards. I've gotten my cards read a couple times, but I don't know that I know. Oh, great. Okay. Magician equals willpower, but devil equals negative influence. He's both. He is both. I would probably say the magician. I would say that willpower is probably his dominant trait, because it's not like he's actively trying to be a negative influence. He just doesn't know how to be a positive influence, because he's just selfish and badly behaved. I feel like the magician is more about possibilities and the devil is about feeling trapped or oppressed. Well, I mean, early Damien is magician. Maybe current Damien is the devil. That probably would be, yeah, season 4 Damien, I would say, is probably feeling more trapped and oppressed versus full of possibilities. But you guys will hear in the next episode, which comes out next Wednesday, so a week from tomorrow, is Damien's episode from his perspective. It's a little bit shorter than our more recent episodes, about 18 minutes, but it's chock full of stuff. You got a whole lot of Damien in a short amount of time. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear it, because it's sounding great. I take it you like Damien, Key. Yeah, boy, indeed. Some decks show the devil as having a way out just outside of this person's grasp. Interesting. A Shadowscapes. I will have to check that out. Sounds like someone needs to read an in-depth tarot reading of these characters. I think someone does. I think that someone is in the chat right now, or maybe a couple someones, and I would love to read that. Please send it to me if you end up doing that, because I'm fascinated by tarot cards, but I don't really know all that much about them. Yay, hype indeed. Cool. So we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for tuning in to this live stream and listening to me ramble on for an hour about stuff. I hope that this has been interesting and informative and has gotten you excited for what's coming up in the season. Yeah, we've got episode 46, the Damien episode, coming out next week. That's on the 27th. So I hope everybody, if you celebrate Christmas, has an amazing Christmas. I hope for those of you that celebrate, you have a wonderful final evening of Hanukkah, and that everybody has a happy new year. And you'll be hearing a lot more from us in 2018, which I can't believe is in 11 days. That is bonkers, or 10 days, 12 days. What day is it even? But yes, thank you so much for supporting us, and for standing by us through the whole crazy journey and the whole crazy Patreon thing. We really appreciate it. I'm really glad that got resolved and that we are not doing any of the fees. So thank you guys so much for just everything. And I hope you guys have an awesome holiday and a happy new year. And as always, stay strange. Thank you all so much. I love you all more than I can say. Bye, guys.